Thank you, Anna. Thank you for your wonderful and clear presentation. I have one question for this peer review. How often do you do the peer review every year and for every faculty?
Okay. This is an excellent question, and it precisely goes with this theme of how to come up with a model that's doable and sustainable. You know, on the one hand, it would be great if everyone could benefit from a peer review every year, every faculty member. It's absolutely, in our context, undoable. You know, I mean, we just don't have the capacity, human capacity to do it. We do not feel that the value of it would outweigh the loss caused by taking that time for peer reviews out of research and out of, you know, teaching. So we said, no, every year, you know, it won't work for us. What we've then said, well, okay, so what are some of the moments where these summative reviews are particularly critically important? Okay. And we tied them to the cycle of reviews for reappointment, promotion, tenure, and so forth. So no one can go for reappointment without having been peer reviewed. No one can go for consideration of tenure without having a peer review before that. So by that time they would have at least two, right? No one can be considered for promotion to any rank, you know, including full professor, you know, without having been peer reviewed, right? So we said that our priority is, at this point in time, given our institutional capacity, to peer review colleagues at the times where important, in summative ways, right? At the times where important decisions have to be made about their career, right? Parallel to that, we run formative peer reviews, which are then much less, you know, rigorous and structured and allow much more flexibility. And you can also have more, you know, kind of mentor-mentee relationships that can help improve teaching. But you don't have to have the whole formal process of, you know, very comprehensive assessment, right? The peer reviews can focus on just specific aspects of teaching that are critically important to improvement in an individual case. But for a summative peer review, you can't do that. You have to go much more comprehensive. So generally, our policy says that all faculty members will have their peer reviews at least, and you're going to be a bit shocked because it's a long period of time, but we had huge pushback in terms of the you know, resource intensiveness, at least every 10 years. Plus, of course, everybody has to have them at this critically important stages in a career. So it works out to much more than every 10 years. But you know, someone who is a full professor, you know, and who continues to be in a role, it's not that once you become full professor, you're off the hook and you'll never be peer reviewed, right?
The professors, and also enhance the quality of learning outcome from the student. What is the connection between these two?
So we had very extensive discussions with colleagues about this, of course, right? And we looked at a couple things. One was we tried to look what research says, you know, what we can find in the body of research about the practices that support effective teaching and learning, okay? And we tried to ensure that the principles and the procedures that are being developed allow to pay attention to those things that the research says do matter in terms of student learning and student success. The other point that we very seriously considered was the point of, you know, how, I mean, you know, if we were to go through each of our, you know, principles, that would, I think, become a little more clear how they tie to it. But for instance, you know, the principle of accuracy speaks exactly to that. The principle saying, you know, how can we find out that the information that we get is accurate, you know, defines, you know, what you actually, you know, describes or attends to what you actually do in teaching, and how this accuracy of observation can then be mapped onto, again, those principles, what we know supports quality teaching and learning, right? When we looked at the integrity principle, that one had to do more with the process of reviewing rather than the outcome of review. To saying, for example, well, you can just rely on one person's judgment, right? You can't rely only on, you have to be sure that there is enough of an arm's length relationship and so forth. So each of the principles looked at either some of the aspects of the substance of what is being evaluated and how it relates to excellence in teaching and learning, or to the procedural, if you will, fairness and credibility of the process itself. Yes?
Yeah, I think I would like to ask a practical question, that is, what are the perspectives that you find match with student review, the peer review result match with student review results, and which are the tasks that doesn't match?
Okay. I would say that there generally, there seems to be a high degree of consistency in student evaluations and peer reviews, which was kind of interesting because some of the colleagues who were hugely skeptical on student evaluations were actually shocked to see how in line many of these assessments are. Where the discrepancies occurred, they, in most cases, at least from what I have seen, I have not seen all of the reviews, of course, but what I have seen are in instances where faculty members were championing or piloting an innovation. Where something completely new, especially if it's radically new and different, was being introduced. For instance, in some cases where faculty members started implementing flipped classroom approach, some students really, their evaluations went down. Now, does this mean that the flipped classroom approach was bad in itself, or that the faculty members were not effective in it? Well, certainly there are different possibilities. One is that flipped classroom requires more effort on behalf of the students outside of the classroom, okay? And some students just reacted to it. So say, well, before I could just sit comfortably, snooze from time to time, but in the end you gave me your PowerPoint and I could prepare for exam, right? Now I have to actually, watch this lecture on my free time, right? But there is also a possibility that particularly in an initial implementation, the faculty members may be struggling with implementing flipped classroom approach. One of the biggest problems that we've experienced with this particular pedagogical paradigm is that the faculty members underestimated the time investment that is needed for students to effectively engage with flipped classroom format. So in the end, they still try to pack in terms of curricular content that let's say they had with the students, while still requiring them to attend, virtually an hour-long lecture, and it just was becoming, when you edit all the courses together, it was an overload that students couldn't cope with. Okay, so clearly that's a challenge. Now, does this mean the person is a bad teacher? No, they are just engaging with something new. They are trying it. Student feedback is very helpful because then we can sit down and say, okay, so time management was an issue, right? And then they can improve, right? So some of this evaluation drop might have been because the students just had hard time to wrap their heads around the change, but some might be because initially you sometimes, you learn from mistakes, right? You try something, but it doesn't always work in the first round. And what's important that in the use of peer reviews, we pay attention to it. We say they are going to be looked at in context. If you've had negative peer review or negative student evaluations, you always have a right to explain, to sort of provide a response. And if the response is, well, they are all, silly, that they don't know what they are talking about, okay, you usually don't pay attention to it. But if the response is, they've got some good points. However, this is the first time I was trying it. I misestimated this. Next time I'm going. I think that's an example of excellence in teaching, actually, that you are very reflective, that you are able to use feedback for improvement.
Okay, I think it is a time for snack and tea for our freshmen. Before conclude the section, I will announce that since it is unfair to just the student evaluate the teacher, we should let the teacher also review the characters. So we will adopt the UBC model next semester in NTNU. I'm just kidding. I'm making some mistake by I have a predetermined scheme by using the blueprint of other universities.
Yeah.
So I'm just kidding. But I think definitely we'll try to do that in a fair and a good way. So let's thank you again for Anna's presentation.
Yeah. Thank you very much.